Hello and welcome to Creature Features. You know what everybody loves? Vampires.
Everybody loves vampires. They're bloodthirsty monsters, sophisticated gentlemen, sparkling teenage losers.
Now, how did that get in there? Can we fix this, please?
Sexy shirtless Skarsgård? Better. They've been in movies for better and for worse for almost as long as there's been cinema. As early as 1913 with The Vampire, we've been obsessed with the idea of bloodsuckers. And no film from this early period of cinema has been as well remembered as 1922's Nosferatu, eine Symphonie des Grauens, or Nosferatu, a symphony of horrors for those who don't gel with the whole German thing. The 1920s in Germany was a very interesting time and place for cinema. This was the height of the Expressionist movement. Everything here was dark, brooding shadows, weird sets and strange makeups. The perfect environment to bring a horror film to life. And where to look for a horrifying monster to bring to the silver screen? Why, books, of course. Specifically, one book. Dracula. You know Dracula. I don't need to explain to you who Dracula is, where he comes from, and why he's so cool. Because everybody knows who Dracula is. Even back then, before any films had been made of him, the book had received immense critical praise, so it made sense to make a film of it. I mean, what could possibly go wrong with making a film of Dracula?
Rights. The rights. You need the rights. They didn't have the rights.
Nosferatu was a completely unauthorized adaptation of Dracula, so to get around the copyright laws, they just changed the names of the characters. And surprisingly enough, that didn't work. The Stoker estate sued them hard, and Prana Films went bankrupt as a result, and the film was nearly completely destroyed. Fortunately, at least one copy survived and was spread around and copied enough that it lives on to this day, and it's now in the public domain, meaning you can even find the whole movie on YouTube. Since hitting the public domain, a lot of versions of this film have been altered to give the characters back their original names from the novel, and the version I found had this, but for the sake of doing this right, I want to call them by the names the original filmmakers called them, these being Count Orlock, Thomas and Ellen Hutter, Knock, and the Professor. So, let's hope we don't get too confused with that.
So, without further ado, let's take a look at Nosferatu.
The film follows the plot of the book relatively closely at first. Knock sends Hutter to visit Orlock and sell him a property, and while there, he learns he's a vampire, or Nosferatu, and then gets temporarily trapped there while Orlock sets out on a ship so he can bite all new kinds of necks. Then a lot of stuff gets cut out, to trim down the characters and plot to a very simple hour and a half. The biggest difference in the plot is the way that Orlock is dispatched. Rather than a chase back to Transylvania where he's staked to death, Ellen tricks him into coming into her room and staying there to drink her blood until the sun comes up and crossfades him to death. So yes, in this horror film made in 1922, a woman is the hero who defeats the monster by her own intelligence alone, without the help of the useless professor. Surprisingly feminist for a film from this period.
But wait, I hear you cry. If this film is such a simplified version of the plot of Dracula, why shouldn't I just go and find a version that has, dialogue?
Why should I not just watch the one with Gary Oldman instead of this? Well, honestly, that's a tough point to counter. I mean, I love silent films, but some of them can be hard to digest when you're used to a more modern filmmaking style, and this is no different. You get a whole lot of scenes that drag and don't feel relevant to the rest of the plot. I mean, did we really need to see the Professor giving a lecture on Venus flytraps? Don't give me that Vampire of the Vegetable Kingdom garbage, it's irrelevant and it doesn't help build the mood. And so much time is taken up by the intertitles. I know there needs to be time to read them, but some are just so long that it kills me. And it kills the pacing of the film. The scenes that need these intertitles are without a doubt the weakest parts of the film, especially when it's related to the side characters. Another thing that can drag this film down like a ton of bricks is the score. Now, to be fair, a lot of the original score was lost, so a whole bunch of points of music are made after the fact, and this might only be in the version I saw, but what was added just does not fit. I mean, listen to this. It sounds like it should be in The Pink Panther, not one of the most iconic horror films of all time. Just another example of how this film hasn't aged too well in a lot of aspects.
But in other areas? Well, this is where it gets interesting.
Let's take a look at the visuals. This is an expressionist film after all. The film is chock full of fantastic visuals that really hold up. Look at this lighting. You can just feel the oppression of Orlock's presence. And look at this shadow. Remember that other Dracula film? Seem familiar? This shadow is still very haunting to this day. It just works. I mean, look at it. You look at almost any horror movie and you'll see this combination of ominous lighting and shadows. Given how easy this makes it to hide your monsters, that's hardly surprising, but an awful lot of them look like these shadows. They're pretty ubiquitous. The other great thing in this film? Max Schreck. Look at this horrifying specimen of vampire. Normally when we think of Dracula, we think of the Bela Lugosi look. But that hadn't happened yet. So instead we get this bald-headed, long-fingered, vulcan-eared fella. He's pretty damn creepy to look at and really holds a place in cinema history as one of the original great monsters. The way he moves is weird, over the top and just unnerving to watch. There's points where it can turn unintentionally funny, like when he's moving his coffin around. I want to carry everything like this now. But overall, he's still fairly effective as a horror villain, and inspired a whole look of different kinds of vampires, as more monstrous looking and often vicious. Plus, he has amazing hats.
I appreciate a good hat.
So, with its ups and downs in terms of quality, would I recommend this film? Not exactly. It's interesting for film fans to look into the origins of a lot of horror tropes, and it has some effective scenes, but for a casual filmgoer, this is going to bore you. It's an important film for sure, inspiring so many future endeavours, not the least of which being a remake in 1979, which I have yet to watch, and another remake currently in the works. But it hasn't aged terribly well, and a lot of it is just dull to watch. So if you really want to know your film history, give it a look, but take it with a pinch of salt. It can be difficult to take seriously by today's standards.
So that's Nosferatu, a classic of horror that hasn't aged too well. But next time, we'll be looking at one that's aged perfectly. Until then, this has been Creature Features.
If that was you on the phone and you on the bus, then who was flickering the lights? Nosferatu!